WJCT.com.
Bold Events presents An Evening with John Legend, live Saturday, August 24th at Daly's Place. Join the American singer-songwriter and pianist known for hits like All of Me for a night of songs and stories. Tickets and information at dailysplace.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, following 3 recent overdoses and the arrest of 17 people, including a corrections officer at the Duval County Jail, we discuss the crisis of drugs behind bars. Then, 8 flags, pirates, and a whole lot of shrimp. We preview events surrounding the Fernandina Beach Bicentennial. And you are here, but where exactly is that? Planetarium Director Eddie Whistler gives us a spatial orientation check. Plus, the week's cultural must-do list with Yaya Cardona of Create Jax. You can join our conversation on air by giving us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out via Facebook, Instagram, or X. And starting this week, you can watch the program every day in real time on the First Coast Connect YouTube channel. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. In California, police are clearing the pro-Palestinian protesters' encampment on the campus of the University of California, Los Angeles this morning. Sergio Olmos, investigative reporter with Cal Matters, has more from the UCLA campus.
There wasn't a single moment where there was a tip-off. Police were slowly positioning themselves around the encampment. Protesters were trying to figure out which entrance they would use. Before the police came in, they started lobbing concussive sound grenades. So they kind of go in the air and they blast real loudly. It's like an aerial flashbang. They're very loud. I think I clocked 113 decibels.
Sergio Olmos reporting. This after police told protesters to leave or face arrest. Several people have been detained. More than 1,000 people have been arrested in protests in campuses around the country. The House has overwhelmingly approved a bipartisan bill aimed at combating anti-Semitism. NPR's Barbara Sprunt reports House Republicans are trying to use the issue to unite their majority with some Democrats on the defensive.
The Anti-Semitism Awareness Act would adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism for federally funded education programs. The organization lists examples of anti-Semitism in public life, including claims that the existence of Israel is a racist endeavor. Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York sponsored the bill.
Right now, without a clear definition of anti-Semitism, the Department of Ed and college administrators are having trouble discerning whether conduct is anti-Semitic or not.
70 Democrats voted against, with some arguing the bill is too broad and would curb speech criticizing Israel. Barbara Sprunt, NPR News, Washington.
Former President Donald Trump's hush money trial continues in New York today. Keith Davidson, the attorney who represented adult film actor Stormy Daniels, will be back on the stand. NPR's Andrea Bernstein has more.
When we left off on Tuesday, Davidson was testifying about a deal he'd made with Michael Cohen, who was representing Donald Trump. Cohen entered into an agreement with Davidson to purchase the rights to Daniels' story to silence her, Davidson said, so she wouldn't hurt Trump's campaign. This was the only time Davidson testified that he'd ever made a deal with a private party like this. But weeks after the deal was signed, Cohen hadn't paid up. By late October, Cohen still hadn't paid the $130,000, and Davidson said he was increasingly frustrated. At one point, Davidson testified no one wanted to talk to Cohen. Both the prosecutor and some jurors laughed. Andrea Bernstein, NPR News, New York.
U.S. futures contracts are higher this morning after the Federal Reserve decided to hold interest rates steady yesterday. Dow futures are up just over 0.5%. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Now, 4 minutes after 9 o'clock, this is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Walmart is closing all of its health centers, including 6 that are in Northeast Florida. The centers provided a range of services, including a primary care, labs, behavioral health, dental, and more. The company said a challenging health care reimbursement environment and higher operating costs led them to not make any money. Local resident Cecilia Lee told our news partner News4Jax that the news came as a shock to her.
Well, I hope that they decide that it is going to affect a lot of people in different ways, and that they'll decide to maybe keep it open a little bit longer.
The company has not yet announced a date for when the centers will close. The closures will not impact Walmart's pharmacies or vision centers. The University of North Florida shuttered several offices yesterday to comply with a new Florida law that prohibits DEI funding in universities. They closed the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the Intercultural Center, Interfaith Center, LGBTQ Center, and Women's Center, all of which provided support services for students, including counseling and health care. The new Florida law prohibits state universities from funding programs that advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Student clubs are not affected by the law. 75 degrees clear in Jacksonville, mid-80s this afternoon, windy from the southeast today.
Support for NPR comes from BritBox, dedicated to helping people discover a world of British TV, including new original drama Time, starring Jodie Whittaker, Tamara Lawrence, and Bella Ramsey. Streaming at BritBox.com/NPR. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, fentanyl-laced paperwork and inmate overdoses. We discuss the problem of drug dealing inside the Duval County Jail. Later in the program, you are here, but where is that? We get a spatial orientation check with Planetarium Director Eddie Whistler. But first, the crisis of drugs in jail. To discuss, we're joined by Nicole Manna, investigative reporter at the Tributary, an online nonprofit newsroom here in Jacksonville. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Mark Bachman, former law enforcement officer with 35 years of experience, including work as a special agent with both the NCIC and the DEA. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
And Ken Jefferson, 24-year veteran of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and longtime community crime and safety analyst. Welcome, Ken.
Good morning. Thank you.
So, Nicole, on Tuesday, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office announced the arrest of a corrections officer and 16 others on charges related to drug dealing at the Duval County Jail. Bring us up to speed on that investigation and those arrests.
Right. So that investigation started in October after JSO got a tip that a correctional officer named Kobe Collette was somehow bringing drugs into the jail. Collette was immediately suspended. The investigation went on for 6 months, and he, along with his sister and a CityWorks employee, Corey Copeland, and 14 inmates were all charged with various drug charges. Corey Copeland is accused of giving inmates who are on his work service drugs. Kobe Collette was accused of actually bringing the drugs into the jail. And the sheriff said that he cannot indefinitely connect all of the charges together. A lot of these were brought up just in the investigation of Kobe Collette.
And so Kobe was removed from his job at the jail almost immediately back in October.
Correct.
But this investigation's been ongoing since then?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you've been reporting on the problem of drugs in jail for a number of months now. There have been deaths that have been linked to fentanyl in your reporting. And then just last week, we had at least three that we know of, overdoses on the women's floor at the jail. So give us an idea of what your reporting has found.
Yeah, so since 2022, 6 people have died of fentanyl overdoses with fentanyl in their system while they were in the jail. And most of those people had been in the jail for a couple of weeks to 4 or 5 months, which in some of the investigative reports I read, led investigators to believe that the drug was obtained within the jail. I think there were 2 people who died within a day or 2 of their arrest. I don't have half of the incident reports because there was an ongoing investigation. So I'm still waiting to see what those will tell us. And then you're right, in April of this, or last month, on the 22nd, 3 women were found in this like unresponsive state, with discolored skin, all within the same housing unit. At least 2 of them were given multiple doses of Narcan, which is a medicine that will reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. And then they immediately came to and became responsive. All 3 of them were taken to the hospital for treatment. All 3 of them survived, and all 3 of them are back in the jail.
Mark, you worked for years with the DEA. How big of a problem is drugs, the presence of drugs in jail?
It's pretty big. I mean, obviously, over the years, contraband somehow finds its way in there. Typically, it's going to get in through somebody who's working there, a correctional officer, maybe even, you have a lot of trustees, and the trustees have more liberties within that jail. So a lot of times you'll see they're the ones that actually bring the contraband in. In this case, you had Kobe Collette, who was a correctional officer, more like a leader and organizer role, recruiting other inmates probably to distribute it once he could successfully get it in with his sister inside the system. So it's not unusual.
How has it changed, this problem of drugs in the jail, in the years that you've been observing and working in law enforcement?
Well, fentanyl's a game changer. It's a game changer in our society. You see it everywhere. I happen to do consulting work for Partnership for Safe Medicines. You'll see it's been laced in just about every drug out there that's being sold on the street, not through pharmaceuticals, but actually sold, being represented in Xanaxes, Adderall, Ritalin, you name it. It's finding its way in. Plus, the substance itself, it can be put in a liquid form, easily transferred to paper in this case, and brought in. Similar to LSD back in the 60s and the 70s, it used to be placed under stamps. It was a liquid form that was put on paper. Same thing with unfortunately fentanyl. It will kill you. LSD, not necessarily people overdose. They do, but they don't. It's more of a hallucinogenic type drug.
Ken, what do you know about how JSO is handling the drug situation in the jail?
Well, a lot of things that they have to maintain privacy with it, because you don't want the bad guy to figure out a way around it. So that question was posed during Sheriff Waters' press conference earlier this week as to, okay, what measures are you taking? And he couldn't share them. They really thought that he was kind of skirting around it, but he has to maintain that integrity of those investigations. And I'll expand on what Mark said. As far as drugs getting into jail, he named the various ways, through family members or visitors, corrections officers. I'll even expand it and say sometimes rogue attorneys will bring in things and smuggle those things in as well, because they got an outside contact. So drugs in the jail, in correctional facilities, are not anything new. It's nothing new. There's any jail USA, you're going to find drugs.
Yeah, and so there have been recent arrests, very recent, Ken, in Arizona, in Texas, in Delaware. Are individual facilities like, the JSO jail just left up to solve these problems that are obviously happening on a wider scale? Are they just left to solve them on their own?
Pretty much, because the sheriff is here in Duval County. The sheriff is in charge of the jail, so he bears that responsibility of security for those things coming and going, people coming and going. You have all kind of people coming and going with the deliveries. You've got to have linens, you've got to have food, you've got to have medical supplies, all these things. And these people are vetted very well, but you see the drugs still get in there. So when you get corrections officers, when you have a shortage, like JSO has a shortage of corrections officers, sometimes they have to scrape the bottom of the barrel just to fill those positions. They don't try to do it. My experience as a recruiter for JSO, it's not that you try to do it, but you have limited resources to get the best and the brightest. And sometimes these people have ill intent coming in. So you never know. You can't read that on a person when you're interviewing them or trying to fully vet them.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the problem of drugs in jail and prison. If you or a family member have been incarcerated, if you have a story to share, we invite you to join the conversation on social media. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can call us at 904-549-2937. Nicole, Ken Jefferson just alluded to the problem of recruitment, and certainly it's a very difficult job to be a correctional officer. Wages aren't great. Does that make them uniquely vulnerable to perhaps being involved in something like this?
I think it could. I think that is a great question to ask, because I know that JSO, as well as other police agencies that I have covered in Texas and Nebraska, all had a really hard time with hiring, and not only hiring but maintaining employees at their jails. I've talked to correctional officers who've said it's not a fun place to work. It's really dark inside. You're inside most of the day. You're dealing with people who don't really want to deal with you. So it's not an easy place to work. And here in Jacksonville, our correctional officers make less than our police officers right off the bat. I know that JSO has done some things to try to recruit. I think there was a $10,000 bonus at some point. JSO did a webinar a couple weeks ago for people who might be interested, and I actually joined that webinar. And I think it was me and maybe 7 other people who I'm assuming were interested in the job. And, that's just 7 people.
Mark, the issue of recruitment is, it's a problem on a lot of levels. Law enforcement's facing a lot of challenges right now, a lot of pressures. And I heard something that I thought was really interesting actually this morning on NPR that sounds counterintuitive, but they were talking about how fewer officers can actually create its own safety issue, because in some circumstances they might be likelier to use too much force because they're outmatched, they're outmanned, and that having too few employees in a prison facility might create conflict beyond what would ordinarily exist.
Well, that's true. I mean, so if you have a facility like Duval County Jail, which the interaction between inmates and the correctional officer gets less and less. You have that central pod that's in there controlling electronic doors. The only reason, and you have general population, we have a bunch of inmates that are housed collectively together. So the interaction there, you're going to have a correctional officer that may be physically called down, summoned down to break up a fight, investigate something. Someone's passed out on the ground or on the floor. Now you may be the only officer down there, so you have to use a lot of diplomacy. Plus, they're not armed. I mean, they're down there. They're limited on what they can do. If they have to physically combat somebody, they're going to bring other officers with them, but that may take a little bit of time. So it does create a problem for the correctional officer. And can I add something is that, when I first looked at JSO back in the 70s, it was and Ken can probably attest to this, that you had to work in the jail 2 years probably before you got out on the road. Am I correct, Ken, with that?
That's correct.
And also, and maybe sometimes longer. I also heard from my sources that a lot patrol officers are now being pulled off the street with less than a year on and being rotating in the jail. Like doing a week stint in the jail every month. So there points to the lack of staffing, manpower, whatever. And again, these bonuses that are offered, those are trying to get people in. And then Ken's been in recruiting. You have to vet these people. You don't want people that are acting like the people on the other side of the bars and they're working. So there's a lot to all that. The dynamics are all there right now for a situation where you have these overdoses, you have investigations in the jail constantly, and it's the sheriff's biggest liability is the jail.
You talk about them maybe not have enough defenses. What are they armed with, Ken? What do they carry with them? Are they not allowed to have a weapon?
They cannot have a weapon inside a jail or correctional facility for obvious reasons. They can be overpowered and unarmed very easily by a number of inmates. What maintains the integrity of the jails is the authority that the correctional officers have, the command presence that they have. They don't have a weapon. They have pepper spray maybe, and maybe one other type of chemical device that they can use to try to protect themselves. But as Mark said, these guys, the Duval County Jail holds about 3,000 inmates. Can you imagine if, let's say, 1,500 of them decide we don't want to be here anymore? They already outnumber the 600 correctional officers that's there. but then that's not 600 there all day, every day. So the integrity of maintaining decorum at the jail lies within those corrections officers. They're not paid very much, comparatively speaking, statewide as well as citywide here. They don't get recognized a lot. They don't get any pats on the back. So they go to work and they do what they have to do to support their families and to try to either go on the police side or do something else. But when you're talking about a $10,000 bonus that shows you that, hey, we need people, we got to draw you some kind of way, we're going to give you a $10,000 bonus to work here. Inmates are very manipulative. Let me just throw that out. They're very manipulative, and they'll find a vulnerable correctional officer and make that person go rogue, just like they did with the one that was arrested back in October, because they'll prey on that vulnerability. They'll look at somebody and say, that person's green. They don't know the streets. They don't know the street vibe. They don't know the street language. So we're going to manipulate them and lure them into our web, and we're going to get him or her to do whatever we want them to do, and that happens.
I want to ask you, because I know you were interviewed back in 2020 after a prison in southern Georgia where state prison had a riot. Basically what you're describing in terms of inmates overpowering the guards. They actually took a couple of guards hostage. A couple had to be hospitalized. They were beaten and stabbed. And there was basically 500 inmates roaming free, all of it being simulcast or broadcast on social media in real time. People were watching this happen. And after that incident, it sounded like some people just couldn't return to work. They were so traumatized.
Oh, yeah, it's a very traumatic experience. You got a very good memory to remember that from 2020. It's very traumatic. It's much like the effect that the incident that happened in Charlotte a couple of days ago, the impact that it has on those officers. It's difficult. It's very difficult. You go back to work with a lot of rage, a lot of anger, some regret that you're in this type of field of work. All kind of things are going on in your mind. But you have to remember the mission. You have to remember what you're there for. You have to remember your calling, because this law enforcement, either on the correction side or police side, is not something that you just wake up one day and say, you know what, I think I'm going to be a corrections officer or a police officer. A lot of times they're there to either use it as a stepping stone to get to become a police officer, or they just need a job. And then once they get there, they find out that it's not paying a whole lot. If they're that gullible or vulnerable type, they can be succumb to those inmates manipulating them. So when you're vetting them, you can't go inside them and read their hearts. You can't go inside them and read their minds. You have to go on information that they give you and information that you uncover, and then go forward from there. And sometimes you pick the wrong one.
Well, we're talking about the problem of drugs in jail. If you want to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. Nicole, you've done extensive reporting on the jail. Are there challenges facing this facility that are unique beyond what we're talking about in terms of national problems, national trends?
Probably not. I think most of my reporting into the jail has been about medical neglect and issues with the privatized healthcare and Armor Correctional Health Services that used to do medical care. But I'm seeing stories out of almost every other state that has private medical care that the same issues are there. So I imagine that the majority of issues are things that we could see nationwide. I just think it's up to our local leaders to decide how to handle that moving forward.
We have a message or two here from Facebook. Tom says, I didn't think they were allowing in-person visitation at the Jacksonville jail, something that is echoed also by David. And I want to talk about that because I know that there have been, I throw this open to all of you, but there have been attempts to rein in contact visits, certainly for the general public. Those have been reined in. But they recently tried to pull back on access for, investigators, attorneys, and attempted to do no contact visits. They got a lot of pushback from people who have to interact with those inmates, have to show them documents, have to go through their case with them, have to review files. Very hard to do when you're on a, phone and holding up something to a, plexiglass window. but that's not necessarily solving the problem, is it, Mark?
No. First of all, if it's an investigator that comes in there, he or she can sign that inmate out. They can take the inmate out for investigation. They don't have to stay inside the facility. Once they sign them out, they take ownership of that inmate until they bring them back. And again, this is a heavy burden for the jail because they got to search the individual again. They got to go through the process again. They got to sign them back in. A lot of inmates don't like being signed out. If they know they're being signed out, then the other inmates inside know they're cooperating. That could be problematic. Okay, so therein lies a lot of the problem. They'll say they're being signed out for a myriad of reasons, but ultimately sometimes they're being signed out because they're cooperating. As far as the attorneys go, they're very limited on what they can bring in. They cannot bring any electronic devices in. I believe at one point, and this may have changed since I've been in that jail, is that they could only bring maybe a pad or some type of writing device, but it couldn't even be a pen. It may have to be a pencil. They would have a room where they could meet and talk. That may have changed, that one-on-one. Most of these interactions that you're going to see with loved ones, with the inmates, it's going to be through some form of glass, picking up the phone, the other individual the inmate picking up the phone, and the communication is back and forth that way. Yeah, I think they've limited that one-on-one contact. I don't even know if they even have it anymore. Ken may be able to speak to that more so than me.
Well, you hit an interesting point, and that's not going to solve it. That's not going to solve the problem of the drugs getting in, because you're going to still have correctional officers, unfortunately, that will go rogue and try to make extra money, or for whatever reason that they do that. You can put all these systems into place, which they are nationwide for the most part, but we still find drugs in the jail. We're still seeing people overdosing in the jail as a result of it. I mean, you got several things that goes on in the jail that they're incarcerated. They've got plenty of time to scheme and to think about things. You've got sex going on in the jail. You got contraband being introduced in the jail, drug paraphernalia in addition to the drugs. You got money transactions going on. You got homemade shanks that's being made during their time in prison, not just being made, but being used, against each other. So you got all kind of things going on other than rehabilitation and incarceration. That's way down there on the list. All these other things are going on way before rehabilitation. That's why when you look at your recidivism rate, they want to go back because they become institutionalized. They can't exist on the outside, so they end up going right back to where they spent a few years prior.
I think people are surprised sometimes to realize just how much contraband circulates in the jail. I know that when I was working over at the TV station, we would routinely get phone calls from people who were behind bars, on their cell phone. But I want to ask you about that idea of an officer being recruited, because there's also been a lot of reporting about the issue of something called like a sleeper agent, which is somebody that's either recruited on the outside or assigned on the outside with a clean record to apply for a job and basically, become an inside agent on behalf of a criminal enterprise on the outside, on behalf of a gang of some kind. Is that something that you've heard about?
I've heard about it on television. I haven't heard about it here locally. That's a very dangerous proposition as well. I've seen it in, I say movies or documentaries, but I've not really seen it here in Jacksonville.
There's been situations with my predecessor agency with DEA where agents have been hired, gone through the process, gone through the academy, end up being assigned to certain areas of the United States, primarily in South America ultimately, but they were initially somehow associated or affiliated with cartels. They were eventually, but they were solely brought in by, or pushed by the cartels into these agencies to infiltrate DEA so they can get into our databases, they could get corrupt information, they could control, they could find things out. I know that's happened. We've seen that. That's hit national news. We had this most recent arrest of one of the police officers who had gang affiliations, I believe, before he even got hired on with JSO, and he maintained those relationships with those individuals that were still in the gang, and it was ultimately funneling information to them as well. So that is on a very much of a local level. It happens. I mean, that jail is a wealth of information for law enforcement because all the calls are recorded. You have people cooperating. But at the same time, again, I'll say this, it's the biggest liability the sheriff assumes. There's sheriffs throughout this state, a few sheriff's offices, and throughout the United States, where jails have been privatized now, and they've given away, the sheriff doesn't want anything to do with the jail, and then they become privatized. That could be problematic, too, because they could be run in any manner. Most of the time, the inmate suffers greatly with these privatized facilities.
Yeah, Nicole, I know that your reporting has been on the privatization component of the medical care at the jail. And we should note that you just recently won a really prestigious award for that reporting. The National Institute for Healthcare Management Foundation issues awards, and you won the investigative and general reporting category. It included finalists from the Washington Post, the Tampa Bay Times, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good, important reporting. The question of addiction and drug dependency is a big part of the conversation because, research has shown that some 65% of prisoners, inmates, are either addicted, dependent, or in jail or prison because of a drug-related offense. And it's, I guess, indicative of why this is such a problem, drug use in jail.
Yes, and it's so dangerous for somebody who is addicted to any substance to go through withdrawal in a jail, especially if the medical care is lacking in any sense of the way. We have had deaths in the Duval County Jail because of people who were going through overdose. I've written about one of them, Lena Odom, and she kept going. And this was when Armour was in the jail, and she kept alerting nurses that she wasn't feeling well. And she was kind of just sent back to Gen Pop, essentially. And she later died, and it was tied to the fact that she was going through an overdose and that it was mismanaged. So it's incredibly dangerous to have folks in there who are actively coming down and withdrawing from whatever substance they're on.
She died because of withdrawal.
Of a withdrawal. Sorry. I
Yeah.
realized after I said that and then just kept talking for some reason. But yes, withdrawal.
Gotcha. We've got a message from Tom on Facebook. He says, keeping people in jail for an extended time creates a marketplace. Quicker turnover of inmates through limiting the use of cash bail, using civil citations to not put minor offenders in jail would drastically shrink that marketplace and reduce the profitability of smuggling. What do you think about that, Ken?
That's a legislative issue, that has to be supported by our local government and as well as our state government to be able to do all of those things. Those are good ideas. Is it practical? Don't know. It hadn't been tried. It hadn't been proven yet. Your citations, it's a great idea for nonviolent offenders to keep them out of jail. They're similar to misdemeanor citations. You just get basically a ticket, if you will, and report to court and pay a fine. And typically it's done and over with for those nonviolent offenders.
I mean, law enforcement doesn't love those, though.
They don't. But you can't overpopulate your jail with nonviolent offenders either. A person caught for shoplifting, a misdemeanor amount, and they don't qualify for a citation, then they're going to go to jail. So they're occupying, that's another space where you got a violent offender that needs that space. It just creates more burden on the corrections officers, more stress for the sheriff as well.
Right. And we got a related email from David. He says, how many inmates are in jail for mental health issues and how many are in for crimes? And I don't have that number.
I don't have the number, but I would tell you the overwhelming majority of inmates are in there with mental health issues. You may have heard the phrase before that the Duval County Jail is the largest mental health facility in the city, and it's true because they overpopulate the offenders.
And that's something that you are aware of and have
Yes.
looked into as well, Nicole?
Yes, that's another thing that is not just unique to Duval County. And I know that there have been counties who have tried to work around that. In Tarrant County, Texas, for instance, real quick, they have a center where if somebody is arrested on a nonviolent misdemeanor crime and they are going through withdrawal or they have mental health issues, they're actually taken to that center for treatment instead of the jail. And that's stuff like trespassing, very low level crimes, but that does divert some people away from the jail.
I know that's something that they've been discussing too as they plan for a new jail
Yes.
here in Jacksonville. So the sheriff, earlier this week addressed the idea of, people who are working for the facility who may have ill intent, like you said. He kind of obliquely referenced that idea. Let's hear a little bit of what he had to say.
If you want to come to JSO and your intent is to come here and do something illegal, don't, because we are going to find out. If you don't want to serve the people of this community, you want to serve yourself, go work someplace else. Go be an independent contractor somewhere else, but don't do it here.
Mark, I want to ask you because there are all kinds of drugs that can be manufactured in jail. And, recently there was this, well, not recently, I guess it was about 5 years ago, but there was this spate of people overdosing, some dying because they were smoking pesticides that were available to jail inmates through the commissary. Very addictive, very lethal, really.
Yeah, at K2 Spice out there, you have a lot of synthetic cannabinoids and cathinones that are being abused. A lot of them are being sold in these convenience stores. They change or alter the substance or the molecule of it so it doesn't fall under a statute, so they can't enforce it. That's happened. And those drugs, the K2 Spice, the synthetic cannabinoids and cathinones, are very prevalent within correctional facilities, not just JSO, but federally as well. Again, it's very easy to get it in. It can be in a liquid form. It can be in a small powder form. It's mind-altering. People can overdose on them. You got to remember something also, and is that these individuals, when they overdose, they can't tell you what they took. So you have a facility here. You got people that are medically okay, but they're going to treat you, but you don't know what they're treating them for. So sometimes, a lot of times, with Narcan and substances like that you're going to administer, that may make the situation worse. Fentanyl, xylazine, these drugs out here, a lot of it, Narcan's not working any longer.
We've got a call from Eric in Arlington. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, my son is down there right now. He's schizophrenic. He's in there for a nonviolent offense. He has no business mixing with some of the folks that are down there. You can turn him loose right now. For those that are listening, I was taking care of him before he got into trouble, but you want the problem taken care of, you got it. I don't know why you'd want it, other than this is just the Republican Party, which runs the state of Florida and has for a long time, war on poor people. That's all this is. They find people that can't defend themselves, can't afford a lawyer, mentally ill, and they pick on them until they end up in the jail down there, worse off than they were before. So if you want 2,999 people in there instead of 3,000, go ahead and turn my son out of it, and I'll come pick him up. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Eric. Well, obviously, a really important conversation and a lot to discuss. I'm sure we'll revisit this in the weeks and months ahead. Mark Bachman, Nicole Manna, Ken Jefferson, thank you all so much for coming in today.
Our pleasure. You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Up next, Fernandina Beach. Recently to Fernandina Beach, or if you've never been, it is a close island destination, and it is soaked in history. It's also celebrating its 200th birthday. Joining me to talk about it is Madison Joza with Amelia Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome, Madison.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yes, Nassau County is celebrating their bicentennial all year. And the bash is going to continue with the opening of the beaches on May 18th from 10 to 4 at Main Beach Park.
There is a lot on the agenda. I mean, for a long time, Fernandina Beach was the place that time ignored, and to its benefit now, because it's got all this great Victorian architecture, a lot of history that didn't get torn down and replaced with something more modern and new. It's changed a lot, though. I mean, I was up there recently, and it's almost unrecognizable, some parts of it.
It has changed, but I'd like to say that we pride ourselves on still keeping it. That feel, that time still forgot it. You go downtown, and it is that quaint storybook. I'm going into the local bookstore. I'm running into people I know. I feel it's still got that charm. And, entering the summer months, there's so many events and so many local things that are so unique to the area. And I think there's a lot to highlight there.
Yeah. And so Amelia Island has got, the island itself has got all kinds of interesting wildlife, nature, beautiful waterways that you can explore. But it's also got a lot of these historic bed and breakfasts, which has been a big attraction.
Yes. Downtown, there's a few that you can walk to, and it's perfect walking distance from all the shops, the marina, all the hot spots. There's beachfront bed and breakfasts, and they are just soaked in history. You hear about famous boat captains that stayed there, and historical figures, and they're amazing to go inside and just really step back in time.
Yeah, I was going to put you on the spot and quiz you. So it's the Isle of 8 flags. Yes. And I looked them up. Do you know them all?
Oof.
I knew I was going to put you on the spot.
You are putting me on the spot.
So French, Spanish, English, Spanish, Patriot, Green Cross, Mexican Rebel, Confederate, and U.S. That's a lot of flags. I mean, it's been seized a number of times. And piracy, excuse me, piracy is a big part of it, too.
Absolutely. And we are the only place in the country that can say that we've been under 8 flags. And I think that's a pretty cool little bragging point for us.
Yeah. So the big thing that people think of when they think of festivals is the Shrimp Festival. So that's coming up soon.
Yes. So actually today, I'm in my shrimp clothes right now, and I'm actually heading back later today to get in the parade. And that's a great way for the local community to come out. So 100 and change floats are going to be out in the streets this afternoon. It's Peace, Love, and Shrimp this year, so everyone's going to be getting their groove on. And then tomorrow kicks off the festival, and it's just a weekend packed full of fun.
Yeah, so the parade's day, and then there's a Miss Shrimp Festival pageant. There's antique vendors, there's fireworks. It really is the full package, and really good food.
Really good food, shrimp in every form you could imagine. And yeah, there's the Miss Shrimp Festival pageant where a local student's going to get a scholarship, which is a great way for the community to be involved. Tons of local nonprofits and school teams are out there as the food vendors, and it's just a great way for them to get some face time. Tons of fun.
I want to just briefly touch on Sounds on Center, because that's a free concert series, and that starts Friday.
Yes, and today actually there is a special one for Shrimp Festival. So there's one today, and then it's the first Friday of every month all through the summer. It's free. You just bring a lawn chair and your appetite for music, and it's a really fun time.
And as you can tell by the name, it's on Center Street.
On Center Street,
yeah.
Yep.
So there's a lot going on. If people want to find out more information about all of the festivals that are coming up, where can they get that?
Go right to ameliaisland.com/festivals-events. And ameliaisland.com is a great place. If you go to our activities calendar, there's tons for you to see on a weekly basis. There's a lot going on.
Well, Madison, Joza, it is so nice to have you on the program. We hope you come back soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Up next, the Pale Blue Dot, home of everyone you love, everyone you know, and everyone who has ever lived. But where exactly is that? Well, here to help us bridge the planetary divide is Eddie Whistler, director of the Brian Gooding Planetarium at the Museum of Science and History. Hi.
Hello again.
Welcome back. Tell us a little bit about our known universe. How much of it is known and how much of it is a mystery still?
So there's a huge amount that's a mystery. We know our location, inside of the thing, building up slowly over time. We know really well our place in our galaxy. We know really well our neighbors that we can look out with telescopes. We can see way out to the universe. So you're going to have to rein me in. Should we start close?
Well, yeah, let me ask you this. How do we know where we are in the galaxy?
So, observation. Really good observation, especially from one space observatory that not a lot of people know about. People are familiar with the James Webb Space Telescope, Hubble Space Telescope, that we're building some earthbound telescopes that are huge. But I think one of the workhorses that doesn't really get its name out there a lot is a space observatory called the Gaia spacecraft. And it does a lot of this mapping. 1.8 billion stars it maps. Now that's less than 1% of the stars inside of our galaxy, but when you have that kind of a sample size, you can really start to find some pattern. So let's linger here for a second, because the Gaia spacecraft is capable of accuracy of just little movements of stars that are equivalent to the width of a human hair held out at 1,000 kilometers. So this is the kind of sensitivity that it has, and it has similar types of sensitivities to the kinds of light that are coming from stars. You add it all up and we can really map our place inside of the galaxy.
I love having you on because at least one time during our conversation, you will just blow my mind with a little factoid like that. You're going to be discussing, though, our place in the universe at an upcoming event.
Yes.
So what should people know about that?
So it's late this month, May 22nd. Ooh, you might know the date. It slips my mind. But I believe it's May 22nd. Maybe it's May 26th. Regardless.
It's May 22nd.
There you go.
9 a.m.
There you go. Lots of dates floating around in my head. But May 22nd is a series that we do. It's called the Silver Space Series. And it's in the morning, 9 o'clock. And for an hour, audiences that are 55 and older get the place to themselves without school groups running around and all the rest. And then at 10 o'clock, we find ourselves in the planetarium. We take an intermission with donuts and cookies and stuff. And then we come back with questions. We answer questions from the audience. But the main theme is, you are here. And like, where's that?
Where is that?
Yeah. So we're in our solar system, the easy stuff. All listeners know this. Then we have our nearby, neighbor stars. But then we're in a galaxy, and we have that galaxy mapped out rather well because of the Gaia spacecraft.
We're the Milky Way.
We're in the Milky Way, but we're between the Sagittarius arm and the Orion spur, a little bit closer to the Orion spur with all of our neighbor stars and neighbor molecular clouds and all of these other things well mapped out. And to see that, to see our own galaxy that we're mapping from within it, like that's a difficult thing to do. Imagine mapping out all the trees in a forest, but you're unable to move, right? So you have to triangulate the location of all these distant trees. And we do this great job. Lucky for us, stars are much tinier than tree trunks. So we get to see behind them a little bit. So it's, it's not the perfect analogy, but.
How have the evolution of telescopes changed? I mean, from the primitive ones in the early days to what we're using now?
It's incredible. And beyond that, we're beyond now relying on light. We're in a phase, although the adolescent phase of astronomy, called multi-messenger astronomy, so that we're not just relying on light on the electromagnetic spectrum, but we're just starting to get into gravitational waves. We're just now getting into studying cosmic rays and what they can tell us about the universe.
Using those to measure.
Using those to give us different information. We're not just relying on radio light and infrared and ultraviolet, everything on the electromagnetic spectrum, but now we have neutrinos, cosmic rays, and gravity waves to study that are going to give us completely new information about the universe. So stay tuned, because this is new stuff. And future astronomers are going to remember the time that we moved from the electromagnetic spectrum into multi-messenger astronomy, which means we're getting this information in a multitude of ways, not just light on the electromagnetic spectrum, but now we're utilizing these other, quote, messengers that give us info.
Love it. Eddie Whistler, thank you so much for being here, and hope to see you on the 22nd.
Yeah, come on by. It'll be fun.
All right. Up next, from Duval de Mayo to still frames and Latin flavors, we'll be right back.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field to fork.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. With a number of high-profile court cases underway, we want to know if you have trust in our courts at the local level, the state level, and all the way up to the Supreme Court. Call 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can leave a message or join us live. All views welcome. Next time on The Middle.
Tonight at 9 here on WJCT News 89.9.
Maybe you're hearing this on the radio, but where else are you finding new music and your favorite podcasts? Odds are you're using a streaming or subscription service. How's that affected what and who you now listen to? Share your story at 855-236-1212, and we'll talk more about our audio lives and the platforms that shape them. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Create Jax and her pup in a bag, Mambo.
Pup in a bag, I love it.
He's here. He's looking cute as ever.
Thank you. Good morning. Buenos dias, mi gente bella de 904. I'm excited because my birthday's coming up in a month.
What?
Uh-huh. And there's a lot going on here in Jacksonville this weekend, and I want to let you guys know. So make sure you follow us on createjax.com, CRE8jax.com.
Yeah, what do you got for us this week?
Well, let's talk about tonight, Thursday. Have you been to this gallery space yet? Oh my God, I can't find it. Dennis and Eve's.
I have not. No, I was curious about that.
That is a new gallery space. And tonight, if you haven't been, tonight is a good chance to go. It starts at 5 p.m. It's the first exhibit open. It's called Inspired by Death, 50 Pictures the Year My Mom Died. Wow, that's
Yeah, so it's kind of a heavy topic, but I think it ultimately supposed to be sort of inspiring. It's the 1-year anniversary of his mother's death, and
Yep.
this is like a collection of photos he took.
Yeah, he says that he describes it as an exhibit that showcases equal parts of pain and beauty.
Oh.
I think that's interesting. I want to check that out. So that's tonight, Thursday. Now, let's talk about Friday. There's another Margaret Street Studios has an open studio pizza party starting at 6 p.m. If you've never been, Market Street Studios is located directly next to Memorial Park in Riverside, which I love.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that, the sunset is setting pretty late. So go out there, check them out.
This is like a collaborative studio, artist space shared.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're going to be showcasing abstract art. So once you check that out, then you can go to the Memorial Park with your blanket and, watch the sunset and have a beautiful day.
That is a nice
Look at that.
alignment.
I'm
Yeah.
planning, husbands, I'm planning your Friday date right there for you. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Another one I want to talk about, FSCJ. They're having their artist series. Frozen is here. It's their Broadway showcase. They're going to be here till May 4th. It's a lot of fun. It's Broadway for Frozen. If you want to get
going to be like
tickets,
a lot of kids at that one.
well, they're kids under the age of 8 are not allowed to go. So it's a little bit more towards like the adult version.
Is there rules against singing along to all the songs?
I mean, I will be singing "Let It Go." Sorry, I songbobbed all of y'all, but yes, if you guys want to get tickets, use the code Anna to get 25% off on your tickets for that. All right, let's talk about Saturday. Unidos en la música.
Yeah, this is St. Augustine.
Yes, in San Agustin. All right. This is one of the only Hispanic festivals that St. Augustine has, and it's produced by my good friend Erica Whites and her husband and her a couple of friends of hers. I'm really excited about this. It starts at 10 a.m. and they're going to have all kind of activities. It's at Francis Field. They're going to have performances by World Salsa Summit champions Emily and Raul.
How fun will that be to watch the world champions of salsa?
I'm gonna try to, I think I'm a salsa dancer, man. I love to dance salsa, but oh man, I'm excited about that. But more than anything, this famous 7-time Grammy Award winner Fonseca is the headliner. Guys, his kind of music is like a pop jazz Latin music. So check him out, Fonseca. You don't have to be Hispanic to come to this festival. Come on out to Unidos de la Música. That's going to be this Saturday. Make sure you purchase your tickets. They're going to have food trucks, vendors on site, all kind of fun of activities. I will be there for sure.
Also folklore performances and live murals. It sounds like a really cool
Yeah, so they have
wraparound.
2 stages. One stage is a workshop stage where they teach people how to dance all kind of Latin dances, salsa, merengue, bachata, flamenco, all of that. They do a little yoga and everything. And then the main stage is with the main activities. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And let's talk about Cinco de Mayo.
Duval de Mayo.
Duval de Mayo, a.k.a. we changed it up thanks to 904 Happy Hour on the North Bank Riverwalk this Sunday. And I'm going to be there teaching salsa and bachata.
Are you really?
Yes, honey.
That is not to be missed.
Uh-huh. Well, first of all, I'm going to be representing the city as my role as the Hispanic Outreach Coordinator. I'll be reading the city's message from the Mayor, Donna Deegan. But then at 4 o'clock, we're going to get our dancing shoes on with salsa and bachata.
This is at the Riverside Arts Market?
Yes, at the Riverside Art Market, starting from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. And there's fireworks at the end. Like, they're going to have a huge fireworks demonstrations. But, guys, there's going to be tacos, authentic tacos, and I know about this because I helped them, make sure that they're going to have authentic tacos out there. So that's going to be this Sunday. I'm really excited about that. There's a lot of local talented coming through. So check out the full list of all the activities happening this weekend and more at createjax.com. And follow me on Instagram, Yaya Love Jax.
Yaya, thanks so much for being here.
Gracias.
And that's our program. We encourage your feedback or suggestions. You can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show is produced by Stacey Bennett and directed by Brady Corum. Join us tomorrow for our Friday Week in Review, and definitely make a plan to tune in next Tuesday when we take a deep dive into the scandal that involved not just JEA, but FPL, phony ghost candidates, and a statewide effort to undermine elections. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.